The snow had fallen quiet that morning, the kind that softened the edges of the world and made a man feel like he'd been erased with it. Elias Boone stood by the woodpile, sleeves rolled to his elbows, breath coming in slow puffs that drifted like ghosts across the frostbit air. His axe bit cleanly through the log, again and again, rhythm marking time like a heartbeat too stubborn to quit. 40 winters had aged his bones, but it wasn't age that wore at him, it was absence. A home too silent, boots too still by the hearth, memories louder than voices ever were. He glanced at the sky, streaked with early bruises of dusk, and thought about going in. Coffee was cooling on the stove. The fire had probably dimmed to coals. Then he heard it, not a sound exactly, more a shift in stillness. A break in the hush. There, by the fence, lay something that hadn't been there before. Not a deer, not a wolf. Something human, curled into the base of the cedar post like the cold had taken her bones and folded them inward. Elias dropped the axe. His boots cracked over the frozen ground as he walked, not hurried, but with a steadiness born of years of bad surprises. She didn't move when he crouched beside her. A woman, young, maybe mid-20s, skin the color of red earth, dark hair braided and dusted with snow. Blood stained the side of her doeskin dress, dark and drying. One arm was twisted beneath her, and her bare fingers were scraped raw. She should have frozen already. Yet she blinked. Just once. Then again. Elias didn't ask who she was. Didn't ask what happened. Questions came later. First, you got them warm. He lifted her, careful not to jostle the shoulder that looked wrong. She was light, but not frail. Muscled under the dirt and torn hide. She made no sound, just a breath that shivered in his collarbone as he carried her inside. The cabin was simple. One room, stone hearth, rough table, and 2 chairs that faced the fire like old friends too proud to talk. Elias laid her near the flames, wrapped her in his own quilt, and fed a pine log to the fire. The flames crackled up with a hiss like they recognized her pain. She stirred when the warmth touched her, eyes flicking open. Dark, wide, the color of wet bark. She didn't speak. He didn't expect her to. He only met her gaze long enough to say without words, "You're safe. For now." He poured hot water over dried yarrow, mashed it with the back of a spoon, and tore strips of an old shirt for bandages. She winced when he touched her shoulder, but still didn't speak. No complaint. No plea. Just grit in her jaw and a single tear that slipped sideways and vanished in the quilt folds. The wound wasn't deep, grazed by a bullet maybe, or a knife that missed its mark. But her body told a longer story. Scars old and new. Fingers that had held tools or weapons. Feet blistered from running far. And a look in her eyes that said, "I've survived worse, but not much. You got a name?" Elias asked, voice low, like asking more might scare her off. She stared at the fire, then back at him. "Sonia." The way she said it made it sacred. Not a greeting, just a marker, like carving initials in a tree before winter came. "I'm Elias," he said, though he figured she already knew. Folks in Sunawee knew his name, even if they didn't speak it kindly. Silence grew between them, but it wasn't hollow. It was full of the fire's crackle, her breathing, the creak of the rafters under the snow's weight. Elias busied himself with broth. He ladled it into a tin cup and offered it wordlessly. She took it with her good hand, sipped slow, watching him all the while. Outside, wind slapped against the shutters like it had a message to deliver, but couldn't form the words. Elias watched the shadows play along the floorboards and thought about the last time someone had shared this space. His wife, Eliza, gone 5 years now. Fever took her fast. Their daughter, too. Buried out back under the cottonwood, where the roots drank sorrow and gave back nothing but shade. Sonia didn't ask to stay. She didn't explain her bruises or the blood, or why she'd collapsed as strangers' fence. But Elias didn't need the story yet. He'd seen enough women passed around like debts, settlers, natives, drifters alike, discarded when trouble came. He could wait for truth. What mattered was that she was still here, still breathing. He offered her the cot by the fire and took the hard-backed chair by the wall. She watched him settle there, like it surprised her. Like most men wouldn't. "You should sleep," he said. She did. Eventually. In sleep, her face softened. The tension melted out of her jaw, and for a moment she looked younger, like someone who hadn't yet learned to mistrust every kindness. Elias didn't close his eyes. He listened to the fire, to the wind, to the echoes of memories that stirred whenever silence grew thick. He didn't know yet what she was running from, but he knew the look in her eyes. He'd worn it himself once in the mirror, when the world had taken more than it ever gave. The hours passed, night thick and unyielding. Snow kept falling, muting hoofbeats and hiding tracks. Elias stood once to check the door, bolted it. On the sill he saw blood. Just a smear, hers most likely, but something in it gave him pause. Not fear. Just a sense that things had begun. That choices made now would ripple out, unshakable, into the lives of others. Back in the chair, he watched her sleep. One hand curled tight to her chest, as if she still clutched something she wasn't ready to lose. He understood that. In the stillness, with only the fire to keep him company, Elias let his mind speak quiet words he never said aloud. If you come here with ghosts, girl, you won't find judgment. Just another soul learning to live with them. And from far off, deep beyond the trees, a sound rose, a call. Not a coyote, not a bird, human, echoing across the night like a name almost spoken. Elias didn't move, just listened, and knew deep in his bones that the quiet wasn't going to last. The snow kept falling, and the fire kept burning. Morning cracked over the hills in soft gray light, the kind that made the world feel half-dreamed. Elias Boone saddled his mule, boots crunching in the frost, breath clouding in front of him like restless spirit. Behind him, the cabin sat quiet, a curl of smoke whispering from the chimney. Inside, Sonia slept beneath his quilt, her wounded shoulder wrapped in yarrow and cloth. She hadn't said much after her name, but she'd stayed. That was saying something. He left her a pot of beans warming near the hearth, a pitcher of water, and the fire stoked high. Then he rode for town, slow, deliberate, like a man with nothing to hide and plenty to guard. Sunawee hadn't changed. Boardwalks creaked with gossip, and the church bell rang hollow though no one was inside. The mercantile stood like a backbone, its windows dusty with last week's wind. As he tied his mule, Elias could already feel it. Eyes. Watching from behind curtains, from under hat brims, from the corners of mouths too eager to speak. He stepped into the store. Heat and dust met him first, then the smell of old flour and smoked meat. Behind the counter, May Trumbull stood like she had every Tuesday since the war ended. Her hair was a gray nest under a lace bonnet, her eyes bright as ever, always seeing more than they let on. "Well now," she said, voice stretched with meaning. "Haven't seen you come in this early in near a year." Elias took a basket. "Need cloth, salve, dried herbs if you got 'em." May's hands didn't move. Something hurt. "Something's healing." She raised a brow. "That's so." He didn't answer. Just kept filling his basket. Yarrow, comfrey, a jar of honey, a bit of willow bark. He added coffee, as if that might make it look like routine. The bell above the door rang again, sharp as a shot. In stepped Deputy Merton Clay, broad-shouldered, smirking, the kind of man who spoke like he was always trying to win something. His badge gleamed more than his boots, and he wore a pistol like a promise he hoped someone would break. "Boone," he said, with the easy contempt of a man who knew how to weaponize familiarity. "Heard you was out past the ridge yesterday. Mighty cold for a ride." Elias kept his back turned. "Had wood to chop." "Sure. Just funny is all. Old Joe said he saw a shadow limp in toward your land around sundown. Said it looked like a woman." Elias didn't respond. Just reached for a roll of linen. Merton stepped closer. "You taking some squaw, Elias? Some runaway? Ain't wise if you did. Lot of folks out here don't take kindly to that sort of trouble." The silence sharpened. May stopped pretending not to listen. Elias turned slowly, linen in hand. She knocked. I opened the door. That's the whole story. Merton studied him. Not the words. Elias knew men like him didn't listen to words. They listened to tone, to guilt, to what wasn't said. And Elias had learned long ago how to speak like a rock, plain, unmoving. "Well," Merton drawled, "mighty Christian of you." May let out a quiet sniff. "Folks got short memories, Deputy. Boone's wife helped plenty back in her time. Lot of babies owe their breath to her and her needles." Merton didn't flinch, but something in his face tensed. Eliza Boone's name still carried weight, even if her grave didn't. "Just keep your eyes open, Elias," Merton said finally, voice turning like a blade. "Strays bring trouble. Always do." He left with a jingle of spurs, dust kicking, in his wake. May began wrapping Elias's items in brown paper, her fingers swift and sharp. "Is she Comanche?" she asked quietly. Elias looked at her. Didn't nod. Didn't deny. May didn't blink. "You watch the lines, Boone. The town's got dry kindling and tongues like matches. He paid in silence, tipped his hat, and stepped into the cold again. The ride home was slower. Not from weight, but from thought. He didn't like the way the air felt now, tighter somehow, like the town had drawn its breath and wasn't sure whether to spit or sigh. Folks like Merton didn't need facts, just rumor and a crowd. And Sunawee always found a crowd when it needed one. Back at the cabin, the fire was still burning. Sonia was seated near it, arm in the sling he'd left. She looked up as he entered, not startled, but alert. She had braided her hair again, tighter this time, with a piece of twine she'd found. Her face was clearer in daylight, high cheekbones, a sharp jaw softened by fatigue. A cut ran from her ear to her collarbone, half-healed. Elias set the basket down. Salve. And more bandage. She nodded once. Thank you. He unpacked slowly, careful not to crowd her. Her presence filled the space now, not loudly, not like thunder, but like water seeped into old wood. Familiar before you noticed. You left a trail, he said, not accusing, just fact. I know. Folks asking. Then they'll come. That silence again, heavy with the truth between them. He sat across from her, fingers threading twine through a cracked boot sole. He wasn't sure what to say, so he asked something smaller. You eat. She glanced at the pot. Beans were good. He nodded. They worked like that, unspoken rhythms. The hurt ones always did. You didn't pry. You let their wounds breathe first. Later, near dusk, they sat on the porch. Sonia wrapped in a shawl, Elias smoking a hand-rolled cigarette. The land stretched before them, gray sky, darker trees, crows wheeling overhead like thoughts he didn't want to follow. She broke the quiet. I ran because they took a child. Not mine, but mine enough. He waited. They killed the mother. Burned her in front of her husband. The child ran. I covered her. I think she made it. Elias said nothing for a long time. Then, did they follow? She nodded. They weren't wearing blue. Or gray. Just dust and greed. He exhaled smoke through his nose. The air was thick with wood smoke, frost, and something else, an understanding neither of them had earned, but both carried. They'll ride this way, he said finally. Yes. You staying? She turned to look at him. Not boldly, but with a kind of exhausted resolve. I won't bring death to your door. It's already been here, he said. A long pause. I buried a daughter, he added. Her eyes flicked to his. What was her name? Annie. She looked away, blinking. I've never had a place to say names out loud. They vanish otherwise. He nodded. They sat a while longer, both listening to the hush settle again over the trees. When he finally spoke, it was more to himself than her. Funny thing about kindness. Feels heavier when you offer it than when you receive it. Sonia's voice was almost a whisper. Because it costs. Elias looked at her. The fire inside the cabin cast its light through the window, gilding the frost on her cheekbones. I don't mind paying, he said. And in the distance, somewhere far off, a wolf howled. But it didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a promise. Night began to fall, and for the first time in years, Elias Boone didn't feel the cold pressing quite so close. The cabin creaked in the hush before dawn, every timber tense with cold and something unspoken. Elias rose before the light, instinct pulling him from sleep like a tug behind the ribs. The air inside was still warm, the fire banked low, but the air outside the window told another story. The kind of quiet that felt watched. He stepped outside, rifle in hand, not raised, not panicked, just present. The snow lay undisturbed near the front steps, but past the barn, beneath the line of bare ash trees, there were tracks. Not deer, not settler boots. Horses. At least 3. Circling. His breath left him in a slow curl. Not fear exactly. Just confirmation. They'd found her. Or had always known. He didn't call for her. She would already know. Some people woke with the sun. Others with danger. She stood in the doorway moments later, still in his wool shirt, the sling loose around her shoulder. Her hair was unbraided now, falling down her back like a dark curtain. Her eyes went to the trees first. Then to him. How long? She asked, voice low. Few hours. They're not close. Not yet. They're not strangers. I figured. She came down the steps barefoot, snow crunching beneath her heels. Didn't flinch. They won't talk first. They'll surround. They'll wait to see if I run. You planning to? Her gaze met his. It didn't waver. No. Elias nodded. Turned back toward the barn. Then we get ready. There wasn't much to prepare. He stacked more wood near the hearth. He checked the hinges on the doors, the locks on the shutters. The rifle was cleaned. Ammunition counted. Nothing done with haste. No trembling hands. Just the stillness of a man who'd known grief before and didn't fear its echo. Sonia sat at the table, wrapping her hand in cloth, then unwrapping it again, like she needed something to do. A war drum in her ribs, perhaps. The kind that doesn't let a body sit still. "They'll think I've betrayed them," she said after a long silence. "Did you?" She didn't answer at first. Her fingers stilled on the cloth. "I took something sacred. Not gold. Not weapon. A promise. A child the elders marked for silence. One of the old blood. She was to be erased." Elias sat across from her. "You saved her." "I tried." Her voice caught like wind on broken glass. "She got away. I stayed back to delay them. Didn't mean to crawl into your fence and live." His jaw worked, tight and unreadable. "You came to the right door." "No such thing," she murmured. "Only doors that don't close fast enough." He reached into the basket he'd brought from town, pulled out another tin of coffee, put water on to boil. The small things. A man could be brave through small things. As the sun crept over the ridge, the land turned sharp with blue light. The snow was no longer soft. It glittered, hard-edged, hiding and revealing at once. Out near the horizon, dark shapes began to appear, riders. Distant but deliberate. Sonia stood at the window. "It's them." "How many?" "More than we got bullets." Elias chuckled, not cruelly. "Figures." She turned to him. "You should send me out. Give me up. You could say I stole food. You could." "No. Why?" He didn't answer with words. Just poured 2 cups of coffee. Handed one to her. Held it until she took it. That was answer enough. They ate in silence, bread and beans, and the last of the smoked rabbit. She chewed without tasting, but he watched her hands, how they trembled only once, then steadied. How they curled around the cup like it was the last warm thing she trusted. By midday, the riders had vanished back into the tree line. Waiting. Testing. Watching the smoke trail rise from the chimney like a flag. "They'll come after sundown," she said. "They move like the old hunters. Shadow first, voice second. You expect them to talk. They'll talk to me." Elias pulled on his coat, stepped out to chop more wood. Each swing of the axe echoed into the hills, a stubborn sound, a declaration. "I'm not afraid to be seen." Sonia followed, sitting near the stump with a basket of kindling. She sorted without being asked. Her injured arm rested in her lap, but she worked with the other like she'd done it all her life. "They'll think I'm yours," she said after a while. "You are," Elias answered. Then frowned, surprised at himself. "I mean, you're under my roof." She studied him. A long, quiet look that softened her jaw and made her blink slower. No one's ever said that, and meant it kindly. Elias paused mid-swing. Maybe it's time someone did. As the sun dipped low and shadows lengthened, the forest grew still. Even the crows had gone quiet. Sonia went inside to prepare something hot. He stayed out, staring into the pines, waiting for movement. At dusk the air thickened. Then they came. 3, then 6, then more. Silent, on horseback. All cloaked in furs, feathered braids, painted faces half-shaded by twilight. Not charging, not announcing, just appearing, like mist summoned by the dark. Elias lit the lantern by the porch. Not bright, just enough to be seen. Sonia stood beside him, wrapped in her shawl, head high, eyes narrowed not in fear but readiness. Not a single tremor in her hands now. "That one," she whispered, motioning with her chin, "is Taba. My brother." Elias nodded. "He the one decides." "He's the one who mourned me." Taba dismounted slowly, eyes on Elias, then on her. No words. No weapons raised. Yet the air felt tight with 1,000 unspoken arguments. Sonia stepped forward. Elias made to follow, but she held up a hand. "Not yet." She walked alone into the snow, each step measured, ceremonial. The others didn't stop her. She approached Taba, close enough to touch. Her voice carried, though she didn't raise it. "I did what was right." His answer was a growl, low and choked. "You defied the fire council. You took from the path." She was a child. She was a sign. She was still breathing. I could not leave her. Taba looked past her, at Elias, then at the cabin. "You bring our enemies under your roof." I bring protection where none was offered, she replied. He didn't strike her, didn't touch her, just turned his horse in a circle, deliberate, slow. They'll decide. Not me. Then they pulled back, silent as they'd arrived. The line of riders slipped into the trees, leaving only hoofprints and tension behind. Sonia stood motionless in the yard long after they vanished. Elias came down to her, stopped a few feet away. Well, they're testing. I'll know by morning whether they come to forgive or to finish. And you? She looked up at him, face unreadable. I've already chosen. The night settled in like a weight across the roof. They didn't speak of escape, didn't speak of death, only of firewood, of tea, of stitching the curtain that tore when she fell. And when she laid down that night near the hearth, she didn't face the wall. She faced him. Elias, she said just before sleep. Yes. Thank you for not being afraid of my name. He didn't answer, just watched the firelight dance in her eyes until they closed. Outside, the trees whispered, and the night, for now, held. Snow whispered over the land like a hush over a prayer. At dawn, the sky stretched bone-pale, and the hills beyond the cabin wore their frost like armor. Elias stood at the window with his hand resting on the cold sill, watching shadows coil through the tree line. Movement again, more riders, more certainty. They were closer now, settled, waiting. A quiet siege. Inside, the cabin smelled of burnt sage and strong coffee. Sonia had lit a small braid of herbs before sunrise, muttering low words in her own tongue, not asking permission and not offering explanation. Elias didn't need either. Some things were meant for the air, not for ears. They've come to decide, she said without looking at him. Her voice was steady, her back straight. She had re-braided her hair, tightened her sling, and wrapped her shawl close like armor that remembered warmth. Elias nodded. Then let's give them something worth deciding. He stepped outside first, rifle slung but unripped, lantern swinging from his hand. He set it on the porch rail, a lone circle of gold against the pale world. The flickering flame threw long shadows over the snow, making the waiting shapes ripple like smoke. Sonia followed. No words passed between them as she took her place beside him. Not behind, beside. Across the clearing, riders began to emerge, not charging, not hostile, just moving with the inevitability of water finding a path. Horses breathing steam, eyes glinting. They rode until they made a wide ring around the cabin, nearly 24 in all, silent and still. Watching. At the front stood Taba, tall and broad-shouldered, wolf fur at his shoulders and iron in his gaze. His painted face was unreadable, but his fingers flexed around the reins. He didn't speak at first. No one did. The wind carried smoke and tension between them, crackling against the silence like dry brush. Then finally Taba dismounted. He walked forward alone, boots crunching snow, until he stood 10 paces away. He looked first at Sonia, then at Elias. Then back again. You live, he said. She nodded. I do. He blinked slowly, like that fact unsettled something deep in him. You brought him into our circle. I walked into his. Taba's jaw tightened. You broke the line. You took what was sacred and fled into settler arms. I saved what the council would have buried. Is that not sacred? He said nothing. The others didn't move. The wind tugged at cloaks and braids, but no one stirred. Elias stepped forward 1 pace, slow, measured. You came here thinking she was taken. She wasn't. Taba's eyes snapped to him. And who are you to say? Someone who buried his own and never wants to bury another, Elias answered. A beat of silence. Then Taba's voice sharpened, quiet and lethal. Would you kill for her? No, Elias said, and the word landed hard in the snow. But I'd die beside her. There's a difference. The riders murmured. Just a breath of it. Enough to shift the air. Sonia stepped forward now, past Elias, bare hands lifted. I am not asking for your blessing, she said. Only your truth. Taba studied her like a man facing an echo of a past choice. His eyes softened, just a flicker, but it passed. You carry guilt like it's armor, he said. It was never armor, she replied. Only weight. A long pause. Then Taba lifted a hand and turned it outward, palm exposed. Slowly, one by one, the others dismounted and mirrored the gesture. A signal. Not surrender. Not alliance. Something older. Recognition. They formed a loose circle around the cabin, a respectful distance from Elias, but within reach of Sonia. A few moved to sit. One woman unwrapped a bundle of venison and placed it by the porch. Another offered dried berries on a piece of deer hide. No speeches, no promises, just presence. Sonia stepped into the circle and knelt beside a young rider, barely more than a boy. She whispered to him, and he nodded, placing something small in her palm, a carved stone worn smooth. Taba remained where he was, arms folded, eyes still unreadable. "You'll stay here?" he asked finally. "I've chosen," she said. Taba turned to Elias. "Then keep her safe." "I already am." Taba mounted his horse without another word. The rest followed, moving with the solemnity of old ceremony, of roads that don't close behind them but never quite welcome you again either. In minutes, they vanished into the trees, the snow covering their prints as fast as they left them. Elias and Sonia stood alone again, the lantern still burning beside them, its light now a little braver than before. He exhaled slowly. "That went better than I expected." Sonia didn't smile, but her shoulders loosened. "They spared you," she said. "No," Elias replied. "They saw you, and you made them choose grace." She looked at him then, really looked, eyes soft, guarded but open. "You weren't afraid." "I was," he said. "Still am." "Of them. Of losing whatever this is." He gestured to the quiet space between them. She looked away, lips parted, but the words caught. Instead of speaking, she walked over to the bundle left near the porch and retrieved the venison. Brought it inside. Elias followed. Inside the cabin, the fire waited. A little hungrier now, but warm. The kind of heat that came from more than flame. She placed the food on the table, then sat in his chair without asking. "I was never claimed before," she said. Elias stoked the fire, then sat on the floor beside it. "I wasn't sure I had the right." "You didn't," she said. Then, after a breath, "You made one anyway." Night settled slow and thick over the hills. Outside, the wind had stopped whispering. The world held its breath. Inside, they shared a meal, quiet, simple enough. And when she rose to light the lantern again before bed, she didn't ask which side of the hearth was hers. She just let the light fill the corners, as if they belonged to both of them now. The circle had closed, but not to trap them, only to keep the cold from coming in. By the time the sun lifted through the trees again, the riders were gone like breath on glass. No farewell, no trail, only a hush in the woods and a sense that the earth itself had shifted. The snow lay smoothed over hoof prints, as if mercy had swept its hand across the land and erased the sharp edges of what might have been. Elias stood at the porch rail with his coffee cooling in his palm. The taste didn't matter. It was the heat that steadied him. Inside, Sonia moved with quiet purpose, feeding the fire, tying her hair back with a strip of cloth torn from one of his old shirts. She hadn't spoken yet, not since dawn. But the silence between them felt changed, no longer held in fear, but full of breath and meaning. She came outside without a coat, though the air still bit with winter's teeth. She stepped to the edge of the porch and stood beside him, arms folded, watching the woods as if waiting for something else to appear, another judgment, another ghost. "Do you think they'll return?" she asked. "No," Elias said. "Not unless they need you." She nodded. "Then I'll be ready." He watched her profile, how the morning light kissed the curve of her cheek and turned the loose strands of her hair into copper threads. There was steel beneath her stillness, a steadiness not born of peace, but forged through surviving every war meant to erase her. "I planted onions," she said after a while, "out by the left side of the barn." He blinked. "In snow." "In faith," she said. "My mother used to say the roots know when to wake, even if the world forgets." Elias didn't speak, not for a long moment. He just reached out and brushed her knuckles with his. It was barely a touch, but her fingers shifted to meet his, to rest there. Later, she helped mend the fence, one board at a time. Her sling was gone. Her arm still ached, but she didn't say it. He noticed when she winced and brought the hammer to her himself. She nodded her thanks without looking up. They worked until their hands were stiff and their shadows stretched long behind them. At noon, the town came. Not the full town, just pieces of it. Deputy Clay on his dun mare, May Trumbull in her black wool coat, 2 ranch hands from the edge of the valley, all riding quiet, slow, as if they didn't want to find what they feared. Elias didn't go to meet them. He waited where he stood, hammer still in his hand, dust in his beard, boots rooted like old oak. Sonia stepped behind him, then beside him, then past him. The visitors dismounted. Merton Clay narrowed his eyes. Did they come? Elias didn't answer. Sonia did. They came. They chose not to kill. Merton shifted, uncomfortable with the certainty in her voice. May looked her up and down. Not unkind, just weighing. Folks are talking. Saying he's harboring a runaway. Some say spy. Some say worse. I'm not hiding, Sonia said. I walked into his house. I stayed because I wasn't turned away. And now? May asked. You plan to keep staying? Sonia tilted her chin. Unless your town needs to drag me out. Merton's hand hovered near his holster, not drawn, just resting. Elias spoke now, quiet but firm. She's under my roof. That's the end of it. May gave him a long look, eyes shining beneath her bonnet. That your final word, Elias? It's my only one. Silence stretched. Somewhere in the trees, a bird called once, then was still. Then May nodded. Then I reckon the laundry can be picked up Thursday. She turned to go. The ranch hands followed without a word. Merton lingered. You think this ends here, Boone? Elias met his eyes. You hoping it don't? They stared at each other a moment longer before Merton turned his horse and left. When the sound of hooves faded, Sonia exhaled. Not relief, more like release. As if she'd been holding some piece of herself hostage until that moment. I don't want to be a weight on your life, she said quietly. You're not, Elias said. You're the part that steadies it. She didn't answer, but her eyes shone. That evening, she cooked. Real food this time, flatbread from cornmeal and dried herbs, smoked meat sliced thin, broth rich with marrow. They ate near the fire. No prayer spoken, but gratitude thick in the air. Afterward, she opened a bundle she'd kept tied in her pack, something wrapped in soft leather. Inside a necklace, small beads and carved bone, smoothed by years. This was my mother's, she said, passed to her by her grandmother. I thought I'd lose it when I ran, but it stayed. She stood and walked to the door. Elias followed. Outside, the wind had picked up again. Not harsh, just enough to stir the branches and whisper against the eaves. She handed him the necklace. Not to keep, just to wear. Tonight. He hesitated, but took it, looped it around his neck. The beads sat warm against his chest. It felt less like a gift and more like a vow. She looked up at the sky, at the stars starting to blink through the dusk. The wind knows my name now, she said. He smiled slow and small. So do I. That night, they didn't sleep far apart. The fire burned low, and in the half-light, they sat close, not touching, not needing to. She leaned her head to his shoulder. And for the first time in years, Elias Boone did not dream of loss. He dreamed of something planted under snow, waiting for spring.